Hello, and welcome to Old Toy, New Joy, the show where I share with you my previously enjoyed toys I purchased from online sources, thrift stores, and collector shows that once belonged to someone else. This episode of Old Toy, New Joy has a little bit of everything, featuring sports cards, action figures, die-cast cars, comics, and more, as I continue to fill that hunger for nostalgia and search for items not only from my own childhood, but for items which brought great joy to others over the past several decades. The collectibles featured in this episode were also purchased from different sources, whether it be from a thrift store or a secondhand store, eBay seller, Kijiji seller, or vintage toy show vendor. A modern-day treasure hunter of sorts, in my spare time I frequent all of those several sources on a regular basis, as the journey and the hunt for vintage and retro things brings me great joy and peace. I often walk away empty-handed, but that's okay, because it just means I can live to hunt another day. And more often than not, the great conversations I have with vendors and experts about vintage collectibles are reward enough. Which brings me to another point. I do appreciate comments from you, the viewer, and I encourage all of you to subscribe and also share with me and the rest of us your personal stories about how vintage toys and collectibles has brought joy to you. And this is totally awesome. I picked this up this morning at the Hamilton Collectors Show, and this brought back a lot of memories for me, a lot of childhood memories. This is a 1977 Star Wars pillowcase, and you're thinking, what the heck would you want to do with an old pillowcase? But when I was 5 and 6 years old, I had the Empire Strikes Back bedsheet set. I had the duvet and the sheets and the pillowcase, and I loved them. Love them. They were my favorite, and they kind of wore out over time. This is an amazing shape. I don't know what I'm going to do with it exactly, but I thought it was really cool. $15 at the collector's show. Thought that was a pretty good deal. The guy was also selling Return of the Jedi, the entire bedsheet set, but I thought, nah, you know what? I'll stop here. This is good. This was a really cool nostalgic find at a thrift store. Just a few bucks. A couple months ago I came across this. This is a signed picture by all three Hanson brothers. And of course, if you've ever watched Slapshot, the 1970s hockey movie starring Paul Newman, you'll remember the Hansons. They stole the show. Everybody loves the Hansons. They were hilarious. And there was sort of a resurgence in interest, I think around the early 1990s in this movie. I'm not exactly sure when it became a cult classic, probably around then, but the Hanson brothers were traveling around signing autographs, and so sports memorabilia stores were selling items like this, framed and ready to go for the man cave or whatever. So I was happy to get it. It's still kind of in its original packaging, sort of falling apart. I'm not sure if I'm going to hang it up or not. I have to decide where I'm going to put it, probably get permission as well as to where I can put it in the house. But I thought it was pretty cool. So this is a 2009 Jakks Pacific Berserker figure. It's not vintage, but it's very retro because this character was around in the early 90s. I think he came around in 1992, lasted a couple of years. Strange character. Supposed to be like a Norseman or a Viking. He was played by John Nord, who was known previously as Yukon John. He started off in the American Wrestling Association and ended up in the WWF for a little bit. 6'7", around 330 pounds. I love this figure. There was a Hasbro figure of Berserker, but no LJN, of course, because LJN was defunct by the time the Berserker came to be. Many points of articulation. I love the detail. I love the outfit. Huss! Love it. I think it's great. And I picked this up at the Burlington Toy Show in early February for about a third of what it would have cost me on eBay, plus shipping and all that, so I had to grab it. I love my LJN wrestling figures, as many of you know from watching other episodes of Old Toy New Joy, so I was very excited to find this 1988 LJN one-man gang at a collector show in Hamilton just around Christmas time. And great price, because he can demand a pretty penny on eBay. And that's how I kind of sort of gauge, you know, should I get this here? Should I wait? I do my research. I know what he would have cost going online, so I picked him up at the show. As is common with certain LJNs, especially around 1988, that were made with black rubber, and then the paint is put over top of that, you often see the black marks in the face and the hands. Mint, these figures are hundreds of dollars. This was within my price range, and it was a nice addition to my collection. Here we have another LJN figure that I picked up from a collector's show recently. This is a 1987 LJN of the adorable Adonis, played in real life by wrestler Keith Frank. Interesting figure. I do like the figure. The character was somewhat controversial. It was a flamboyant character. Not the first flamboyant wrestling character. There was a few in the 1950s. I don't think they thought this character through very well. There was a lot of stereotypes, potentially offensive to several social groups. The character lasted a couple years. Not a very deep character. Just more a heel to kind of upset fans, which he did quite well. But a cool figure. I don't know how many kids played with this figure. Not a great wrestling pose, but you could definitely use him as your heel in your fights. And I got a good deal on this because his pinky finger had been ripped off. Otherwise, he would have been a few dollars more for sure. I was very surprised to find this item at my local thrift store. He was behind glass, so they sort of knew what they had. They knew that he was more valuable than the things they were hanging on the toy wall. He's a 1973 Marks Best in the West Chief Cherokee figure. And some of you may know that I do like the Marks figures. I already have a Geronimo. And the horse from 1967. This guy came with a cowboy hat and a vest, so obviously a child had one of the cowboy figures, and gave Chief Cherokee some of his accessories. I took those off, gave him a couple of the Geronimo accessories, because I have a Geronimo box with lots of accessories just to make him look a little more authentic. He's in great condition. Plastic is very good. It's not sticky, as many are. You know, the plastic kind of breaks down over the decades. And again, the price I paid was about a third of what he's going for right now on eBay, so I was very happy. Many of you know I am a jazzer, but I do like some other types of music, and I love Nirvana, and Nirvana Unplugged live at MTV Studios is my favorite Nirvana album, and I was very fortunate to find this Kurt Cobain Unplugged 2006 Bravado Merchandising, the End of Music figure still in its package. The package is beat up, but I did some research when I got this guy home, and that's quite common. It's a very thin plastic. I was going to take him out of the packaging, and then saw how collectible he is. And you know, I like to kind of look at eBay, see what things are sold for, what people are asking, just to get an idea of what the value might be before I open something up, and decided, no, you know what, I'm not going to open it up. I'm going to keep him in there. That way his guitar mic stand and all that stay intact. But it's a very cool figure. I'm a big fan of Kurt Cobain, and it was a nice find at my local thrift store. Here we have a couple of Fawcett mini comic books from 1941. In the 40s and 50s, companies like Fawcett put out a lot of these things, like Dick Tracy and G-Man, the Lone Ranger, and Captain Marvel, and Bulletman, as we see here. I did buy these at my local thrift store. They were in the display case, so I paid a little more than I would if I had found them on the bookshelf, but a decent price. I can't afford the actual comic books from 1941, Golden Age comic books of these guys. So this seemed to be the next best thing. They're in really good shape. And I have featured my Lone Rangers figures from Gabriel, 1979, before in an episode of Old Toy New Joy. They made 4 figures and 3 horses. Well, here's the 4th figure. I never had him as a kid. I saw him at the Burlington Collectors Show not too long ago. It was $5. Yeah, he's incomplete. He's missing hat, and I think he came with like a military saber or sword, maybe even a pistol. I can't remember. But I never see these anywhere. So again, I wasn't gonna go on eBay and get just him and pay the shipping and all that unless I saw a really great deal. So I saw him at the show. It was a good price, and now my collection is complete. And as I mentioned before on the show, occasionally I do come across old comic books at my local thrift store. Not too long ago, somebody had donated a stack of 80s comics. I didn't buy them all, but I picked through them and selected a few. So here we have Superman, Detective, featuring Batman, of course, Justice League. We got Shazam. By the 70s, he was called Shazam, no longer called Captain Marvel. Martian Manhunter. Marvel Secret Wars. Superman. Another Superman. Another Superman. Green Lantern. Iron Man. And a couple of Nam. Oops. Vietnam War comics. And I love vintage die-cast cars, of course. Hot Wheels, Matchbox, Lesney, Dinky, whatever. And here's a couple of Tootsie Toys from early mid-1970s. So we got die-cast body, plastic bottom. It's a decal on the side there, no windows. Like just 2 wheels attached to a single axle there. Here's the Ford Bronco. And of course the beloved Gremlin. And most thrift stores that I go to have a pretty good book section, and they'll also have a section dedicated to what they deem to be vintage and antique books. And this one was very interesting to me. 20th Century Etiquette, a ready manual for all occasions. This was printed in 1900. It's in excellent condition. The examples I've seen online aren't nearly as nice as this. Somebody took pretty good care of it, considering it's well over 100 years old. And it was meant to be a guide to etiquette for middle and upper class folk on sort of how to act in society for the entire 20th century, and it was written in 1900. So it's kind of funny. It talks about things like personal hygiene and how and when a lady must be escorted about town and things like that. So it's dated. It's kind of fun to look at, but most of it is not relevant to anything today. Although etiquette books in the 1800s and 1900s were very popular. People trying to kind of work their way up society. You know, white, middle, upper class people, of course. That's what these books are aimed at. So that's also just irrelevant today, because we live in a very multicultural world today, of course. But I will show you a very interesting picture. So in addition to giving advice on how to dress for certain occasions throughout the day, you know, when to wear a hat, when to do this, when to do that, all the medicines and weird elixirs and stuff, they also talk about the automobile. And in 1900, the automobile was still extremely new. I don't know how many people actually had one. And it says here, automobile driving. Since the automobile has come into use, it is interesting to know that it is quite as good taste for a lady to drive as for a gentleman. And here's a lady with her foo-foo dog sitting in this late 1890s, I can't remember if this was a Citroen, I think it was a French car. No seatbelt, no real steering wheel, no roof. just driving along, not even on a paved road. So it's kind of funny to see that, because there's sections on riding horses and stuff. Horses were still, the main mode of transportation in 1900. But I wonder what they thought cars were going to look like today, if they always thought they were kind of going to look like this. But at the recent Burlington Collector's Show, there was a guy with a booth. He had a few vinyl records, and I love vinyl records. And if you've watched my show, I've talked about records before. You'll also know that I love Buck Rogers, and I've featured a few episodes about Buck Rogers. So here's the original motion picture soundtrack for Buck Rogers, and I've played it. It's great. I have the instrumental version of the theme song. They have a vocal version, and Kip Lennon was featured in several things after that. One thing, if you're a Simpsons fan, you'll remember the episode where the Simpsons go to New York and Marge and the kids take in some Broadway. They watch, I think it's the Betty Ford Clinic, and the song I'm Checking In was sung by Kip Lennon. I'm checking in, he's checking in. That's Kip Lennon. So I thought that was kind of funny. But I love this thing. I listen to it all the time now. And if you've watched Old Toy New Joy before, and you've seen my episodes on Oilers hockey cards from the 1980s, and I was a big Edmonton Oilers fan, and as a youth growing up, I collected Edmonton Oilers cards, lots of them. I had a ton of them, and I watched all the playoff games, and I was a huge fan, and I get very nostalgic when I see cards on eBay or at a collector's show, because I don't have most of my cards anymore. You know what happens when you move out, things happen, your stuff gets given away or sold off or whatever. It does happen. So I do collect still, and not too long ago on eBay I decided to pick up a bunch because I saw a good deal from a local seller. The shipping was reasonable. He had a good selection. So quickly, we've got Dave Semenko and Dave Hunter's rookie cards here. Yari Curry's Topps rookie and sophomore card. We've got some early Grant Fuhr and Paul Coffey cards. More Curry and Semenko. The Oilers logo from Gretzky's rookie year. And the Glenn Sather 76-77 WHA card. He played throughout the 60s and 70s. I believe this was his last playing year. He played for various teams, but he was most known for being a successful coach and manager of the Edmonton Oilers in the 1980s. And so this is a really cool card of him being a captain of the WHA Edmonton Oilers before they joined the NHL. Very sharp card. I like that. Speaking of nostalgia, I grew up watching these two gentlemen on TV. One was a movie star, one was more of a television star. But before that, they were football players in the 1970s. Here we have a 1976 Topps Bubba Smith, and he played Hightower in the Police Academy movies of the 1980s, which I probably shouldn't have seen them when I was young because they were a little adult, but I did, and I enjoyed them. And here we have Fred Dreyer in a 1975 Topps, and he was known, of course, for being Detective Hunter in the TV drama from the mid-1980s all the way up to the early 1990s. We'll get a look at the back of their cards. These were both big guys, too. Bubba Smith was 6'7", and Fred Dreyer was, they got him here at 6'6". Thank you so much for joining Old Toy New Joy today and allowing me to share my nostalgic, vintage, and retro collectibles, things that once belonged to someone else and are now bringing joy to me. If you like the episode, please like the episode, and we will keep them coming. In the meantime, I encourage you to visit other episodes of Old Toy New Joy. I talk about lots of cool retro and vintage things. So until next time, this is your Toy Whisperer saying farewell and happy hunting from Old Toy New Joy.